pick and prevail in your fantasy football league with the help of our starting lineup. At host to quarterback the show, we have Nick Giacobbe. Up next, a dual threat in Dynasty and Daily Fantasy, we have Cody Repass. And finally, working the waiver wire, we have Nick Cap. These are your playmakers that will provide you with sleepers, breakouts, and busts to help you achieve fantasy glory. This is the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
Welcome everybody to episode 31 of the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast, where we give you our predictions, our picks with the hopes that we help you prevail in Week 17, your championship week, and the rest. Not really the rest, the end of the 2021 fantasy football season. I am your host, Nick Giacobbe, and joining me is Nick Cap. Nick, we're at the very end. We're at the finish line. If your league does a championship in Week 18, then it's a pretty crappy league, in my opinion. But it's championship week, Nick. How should our viewers be feeling heading into the championship week?
I mean, if you're in the championship, hopefully your commissioner is good enough to make sure you've been guaranteed money anyway. If you're not too confident, see if your opponent wants to switch. But as long as you're listening here, you should be hell of confident because you got the best info on any platform right here on the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast.
And you're not in any championships, right? Did you lose?
I'm in one championship. Yeah, it's for someone with great advice. I'm in one championship.
Well, it's all luck. The playoffs really comes to luck. There's only so much skill you could do. Then you have a guy like Tyreek Hill go out there and score 3 points in your semifinal. So there's only so much that you could really do when it comes to skill. I'm very lucky. I am very, 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 very lucky.
Very lucky, man.
I don't have the screenshots pulled up. I failed, Nick. I apologize. I won both of my semifinal matchups last week by a combined 0.22. Mm-hmm. 0.22. So not even a point. I won one matchup by 0.02. I won another matchup by 0.2. That's my luck this week, guys. I am in 2 championships. I'm in 2 championships, then I'm in a third league with Nick where I'm fighting with my pal Jake for the points. Jake's 20 points ahead of me right now. I need to outscore him by at least 20 points to win the points crown that I'm actually defending from last season. So we'll see how that one goes, but best of luck to you guys in your championships as well as me and Nick. If this is your first time listening, thank you so much. We do this show every single week on Fridays and Sundays. The Friday show, you can find the audio version on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Anchor, basically anywhere where you can find the podcast, you can find the PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. If you want to listen and watch the show, our video and audio version is available on our YouTube channel, PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. Our second show is Sunday mornings. It's live every single Sunday. This week, we're going to do 9:30 a.m. Eastern time. It seemed like you guys really liked that last week. We got a lot of questions. So for championship week, we'll be live at 9:30. We'll also post a question graphic on New Year's Day, Saturday. So if you want to get your questions in then, they'll be answered on the show on Sunday. If you can join us live on Sunday. You'll also watch the replay after that. Tweet us any questions you have for your championship weekend. We're also going to have shows after the season. We're going to have a end of season review next week at some point, and then we're going to have shows throughout the off season, maybe once a month, once every 2 weeks. We haven't decided that yet. Whenever we could find some relevant fantasy news. If you want to follow us on social media, and please do, the Twitter, TikTok, Instagram is PrimeTimeFFPod. Facebook and YouTube is PrimeTime Fantasy Podcast. All right, Nick, we have some injury updates and some news heading into the fantasy playoffs. Let's start out with this one. James Robinson tore his Achilles against your Jets. Nick, you were at that game last week. Cam Akers took all of 5 months. It's usually much longer.
Akers was kind of a miracle.
Yeah, Cam Akers may play this week, which I think is
absurd.
Absolutely insane. But I'm trying to find the backup. The backup that was the number 1 waiver ad this week. His name is Dare Ugunabowale. I think I actually got that correct. I think I'm right on that. So, Nick, how does James Robinson affect your fantasy team if you had James Robinson and now you're kind of out of James Robinson?
Look, James Robinson was said to have one of the easiest playoff schedules going in, at trade deadlines. If you have a TikTok, you know that some dude popped up saying, go trade for James Robinson because of how favorable his matchups are. Well, guess who's going into this week? New England. It's no James Robinson. It's a backup running back. Most of you, I imagine, anyone outside of Jacksonville or whatever college he played for does not know the name of. Trust me, going up against New England at Foxborough with Trevor, it's a really bad formula for success for this
Take
kid.
the Patriots for the spread. I don't know what the spread is, but take the Patriots.
I think it was a 15.5 or a 16.
Take the Patriots.
Spread.
Take the Patriots.
I wouldn't be surprised if New England shut them out 33-0.
Yeah, me neither. Miles Sanders broke his hand. I saw earlier today that Nick Sirianni said he's not going on IR Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, or Friday. So I don't know. I guess he has a chance to play on Sunday. Anything else you've seen on that one, Nick? That's kind of weird.
No, I haven't seen any other news on it. I'm sure we'll be more updated this weekend, right before the game.
That's
I imagine he's not playing if it's a broken hand.
Yeah, I don't think you play him in your fantasy roster either.
No.
Jared Goff cleared COVID protocols, but I think he's also dealing with a leg injury. I think I saw that. Clyde Edwards-Helaire has a collarbone injury. Did he practice yesterday? I don't think he practiced yesterday.
No, he was the only Chief that did not practice this week.
Darrell Henderson has an MCL sprain placed on IR. Sony Michel was a top 10 fantasy back this week. We're going to talk about Sony Michel a little bit later, but Henderson should be dropped. Even in dynasty leagues, I feel like you could drop him. Maybe not if your roster is big enough. Jimmy G suffered a torn ulnar collateral ligament in his thumb, fractured his right thumb. His availability for the Niners game the other day I saw was quote-unquote in doubt. However, Kyle Shanahan did say yesterday, I believe it was, that he has a chance to play. I also saw that Trey Lance has had his quote-unquote best month of practice. So why are they rushing for Jimmy G to play? There's a smoke screen somewhere around here. I'm not sure what the smoke screen is, but what have I been saying all season? Don't trust those 49ers in your fantasy lineups.
Listen,
Samuel,
I would not be surprised if they ran with Trey Lance for the rest of the season, including the playoffs. I really wouldn't. I think the reports out of training camp have been he's been inconsistent up until these past 4 weeks, where he's been consistently a monster. So if they truly believe in this kid, I know you're going into a gunfight because week one of the playoffs, they're going up against Dallas, the Rams, or the Buccaneers. So it's going to be a tough matchup. But, I mean, Jimmy G isn't really much of a better option. If you trust the kid, I say screw it. Just go in there, put him in some real competition, give him that experience. Because I don't think they trust Jimmy G to take him to the promised land. So if you don't trust him to take you, and you clearly don't because you took a quarterback with the 3rd draft pick and moved up with all those picks, I say rock with Lance, and you're going to hear my take on him a little bit later.
Yeah. Lamar Jackson's ankle, he was limited in Wednesday's practice. I think he was limping a little bit. Harbaugh is hopeful that he plays, but he may not. I mean, they played really well with, what's the Huntley name? Trent Huntley? Is that his first name? I keep thinking of
Trent or Tyler. It's one of the two.
Tyler Huntley, yeah. Oh, too many Huntleys. Huntley played well, and so did Josh Jackson that we're going to talk about in a couple minutes as well. So I'm going to save my take, but I'm not so sure Lamar's going to play this weekend. I don't know. We'll see.
Can I just take a minute to give some fantasy advice to anyone in the championship?
Yeah.
If you are in the championship and your opponent has Lamar Jackson going this week, like they're the questionable one, if I'm you, I'm dropping my entire bench. If you know who you're starting and you're confident in it, drop your bench, pick up every quarterback, because if he can't go in with Lamar, there's a very good shot you win it, walk away with the championship.
Might as well.
It's a very big piece of advice for most fantasy owners. Like, if you know who you're playing, if you don't think anyone on your team's cracking their starting lineup, just bench them and pick up every quarterback so they have to play somebody they do not trust or want to play. Leave them with a Baker Mayfield to go start this week.
Darren Waller's now in COVID protocols. I know he's been dealing with a leg or hip issue, but now he's in COVID protocols. We don't know if he's going to play on Sunday. Elijah Mitchell was limited in practice. He's missed, I believe, the last 2 or 3 games, but he could return against Houston on Sunday. It's a really great matchup. Justin Jackson had 34 fantasy points against that Houston defense. So if Elijah Mitchell's playing, you're starting him. Adam Thielen's placed on season-ending IR with ankle surgery. He's been dealing with the ankle for the past month or so. Huge for guys that have KJ Osborne. Osborne, I saw it on Twitter. I forget exactly where he ranks, but I believe he's been within the wide receiver 30 every time he's played without Adam Thielen. So I think that's a pretty good start this week against the Packers, KJ Osborne.
On top of that, the combination of Justin Jefferson and Osborne had combined for like 90% of the target share when Thielen's not there on that team. So the guaranteed workload is going to those two receivers, and Kirk's really not looking any other way other than the running back. So it's a good play.
Dalvin Cook was activated from the COVID list. Looks like he's going to play against the Packers. Wentz was put on the COVID list, but with the new COVID protocols in the NFL that are really weird, he actually has a chance to play on Sunday, I believe, if he's asymptomatic, something like that. It's really wonky, but we'll have more information on Sunday. Yeah. Drew Lock is expected to start. Teddy Bridgewater is still out. DeAndre Swift was a full participant, expected to play Sunday against the Seattle Shithawks. They are horrible. They're the worst team against the run. If DeAndre Swift is playing, he's locked in your fantasy lineup, and he could win you a fantasy championship. So, Nick, anything else you want to touch on with that news? I'll give you the floor.
Completely agree with what you just said.
Let's kick it out to the weekly wrap. We're going to talk about studs and duds from every single position. Let's start with the quarterbacks. Quarterback 1, Joe Burrow, 38.1 points. Quarterback 2, Dak Prescott, 31.3. Quarterback 3, Josh Allen, 30.9. Quarterback 4, Zach Wilson, 23.1. Quarterback 6, Kyler Murray, 21.9. And quarterback 8, Josh Johnson, 19.1. Who's your biggest quarterback stud of the week, Nick, in the semifinals?
I know everybody deserves to rip me for my Joe Burrow take, but I'm still going to double down for this week going up against Kansas City. I know he finished as the QB1. I called him droppable a week after the bye. Since then, he's had one game with double-digit passing touchdown, actually two, including this past week. Had the best game of his career. Clearly deserves all the props in the world for it. But besides that game, since his bye, he's cracked 22 points once. He's cracked 17 points once. He's averaging a little under 15 points per game in that span if you take out this past week. So you're really looking at a guy that's finished in between the QB 14 and QB 20. Kansas City's been locked down on defense. I know the Bengals are a really good team. I'm not taking anything away from them, but I would still considering pivoting after that career night.
For me, I got to talk about Dak Prescott. I say to play Dak. He had a very favorable matchup against the Washington football team. And he's been a bit underwhelming the last few weeks, but he showed out. He showed up being the quarterback 2 in the week, 31.3 points. He helped me win one of my matchups, the one that I won by 0.2 points. So shout out to Dak for that. I also want to give a little shout out to Josh Allen because I was wrong. I believe I had him as my dud last week against that Patriots defense, and I was wrong. And I've been a Josh Allen guy this year. I said he was my quarterback 1 on the year. I said he would finish as the quarterback 1. Right now, he is the quarterback 1. He's been the quarterback 1 for the past, basically since Kyler Murray got hurt. He's been the quarterback 1, both in terms of average. Let me look it up real quick. In terms of average, it's Josh Allen, and in terms of overall fantasy points, he's number 1 by about 27 ahead of Justin Herbert. Then in terms of average, he's a point above Justin Herbert as well. So those two quarterbacks, well, Herbert's a year 2, Josh Allen's a year 4, 3? 4, yeah. So they're both showing out this year. Also, Josh Johnson, Huntley, Johnson, and Lamar have all been very, very fantasy favorable in that system. I just want to give a shout out to John Harbaugh doing a phenomenal job over there with Baltimore. I know they got punked out by the Bengals last week, but they played the Packers pretty tough in Lambeau. They were a 2-point conversion away from winning that game. So all the injuries that team's had, you got to give a shout out to Harbaugh. The quarterback duds of the week, the only one I have is Matt Stafford, 6.6. Do you have another dud? I couldn't find one.
I mean, Russell Wilson had a bad week. Kirk Cousins, kind of. Ryan
What
Tannehill.
about 14 or something?
I guess Brady could be in there with 14 points, but I mean, that's
most of the quarterbacks played really well this week. And
I feel like everybody had an average to above average game except for the few guys that we named. So pretty much Stafford.
On to the running backs. Running back 1, Justin Jackson, 34.2 points. He led me to one of my finals. Running back 2, Joe Mixon, 31.5. Running back 3, Sexy Rex Burkhead, 28.9. Nick's favorite running back of all time.
Least favorite running back.
Running back 4, Damian Harris, 28.3. Running back 5, Nick Chubb, 27.4. Running back 8, Sony Michel, 20.5. Nick, who is your biggest running back stud of the week?
I know I'm supposed to talk about Rex Burkhead here, but I absolutely refuse to talk about him. I'm going to talk about Sony Michel. Sony Michel, over the last 4 games, has the most rushing yards in the NFL. He is absolutely a must start for the rest of your fantasy playoffs, which is just this championship week. But Sony Michel should be locked in. I think this is the third time he finished as a top 20 running back over the last 4 weeks. Twice, he's over the last 4 weeks. His lowest rushing yard game over these last 4 weeks is 79 yards on 20 attempts. That's more attempts and more rushing yards than Saquon's had in a single game this entire season. You have to lock him in.
Yeah, great point right there. Don't fall into the Rex Burkhead trap, guys. Justin Jackson, if you picked up Justin Jackson when Eckler was out of COVID, you probably advanced to your final like I did. My opponent actually was an Eckler owner, and he couldn't play Eckler, and he lost by 0.02. I also want to shout out Damian Harris going up against that Buffalo Bills defense. I might have flopped him last week too, because it was I think I flopped I flopped the Dolphins running backs, but Bills are very good against the run, and Damian Harris had 28 fantasy points, big time playmaker, getting into that final. Running back duds of the week, Jonathan Taylor, 10.8. Running back 30, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, 10.1. Running back 37, Cordell Patterson, 8.3. And running back 39, Alvin Kamara, 7.9. Who's your biggest running back dud of the week, Nick?
Mine's Alvin Kamara. This is not the first time he's had a rough week. And last year, he literally won you a championship with, I think it was a 5-touchdown game.
Yep.
And with Taysom Hill now coming back, Taysom Hill runs the ball. Taysom Hill does not throw those checkdowns that Drew Brees threw to Alvin Kamara, which is where he racked up fantasy points. I think Alvin Kamara, you can debate benching him in fantasy. This week they are going up against the Panthers. I think we're a top 5 team against running backs all year. So there is a very legit shot and a very good case to be made to go bench a guy you drafted probably 3rd, 4th. I think the latest would be 3 in most fantasy drafts. So there's a really good take for it. So I wouldn't blame you if you chose to.
Oh, man. Jonathan Taylor's been the best running back in fantasy this season, arguably the best player. However, he may have lost some matchups this week. And I kind of realized this. I don't want to be that guy, but he's kind of touchdown dependent. He had 103 yards, which is it's a really good game. It's a really good football game. That's a great football running back. It's a great football player. But, man, he doesn't get receptions. And if he doesn't get a touchdown, he might only be hovering around 10 points. That's a trend that we got to look for next year. I'm sure he's going to be a top 3 pick no matter what. However, if you're not getting receptions as a running back, that's a little worrisome. Also, Cordell Patterson, he's going up against the Bills this week. Watch out. The Bills might win that game by like 14. I don't know how productive Patterson's going to be. That defense is a very good run defense. On to the wide receivers. T. Higgins, wide receiver 1, 43.4 points. Wide receiver 3, A.J. Brown, 31.5 points. Wide receiver 6, Amon-Ra St. Brown, 26 points. And wide receiver 8, Jalen Waddle, 25.2. Nick, I think I know who you're going to talk about, but who is your wide receiver stud of the week?
I don't think you know who I'm going to talk about. I'm talking T. Higgins. I wonder if you were thinking number 6. I'm talking T. Higgins.
I was, yeah. I mean, he's your guy.
Number 6 is my guy, and I'm talking about him a lot later. I think he's going to be a big target for next year. But T. Higgins has been on an absolute tear for the last 5 weeks. Last week was horrendous. But over the last 5 weeks, he's clearly shown that he is the wide receiver 1 on that team over Jamar Chase. He has, let me just add it up real quick. Over those weeks, he's averaging 12 targets per game. He has been an absolute machine. T. Higgins is a must start. He is not debatable. He has been one of the most consistent wide receivers in all of fantasy football. He's had 2 bad games this year against Vegas, who's top 5 against wide receivers, and against Denver, who's top 5 against wide receivers.
I want to talk about Jalen Waddle. I've been on the Waddle train for most of the year. I've said when to start and when to sit him. I've been right some weeks, wrong some weeks, but Waddle's only had like 3 games under 10 points. And then everyone's talking about over 15 points. He's had 7, 8, 9. He's had 10 weeks out of 16 over 15 points. That's really productive. He's the wide receiver 14 on the year. He has a really great matchup against the Titans. The Titans have been a bottom 5 defense against wide receivers this year. For fantasy purposes, lock Waddle in. Waddle's going to help you win a championship this week. On to the wide receiver duds. We have a lot of them. DJ Moore, wide receiver 46, 10.5. Wide receiver 47, CeeDee Lamb, 10.4. Wide receiver 51, Marquise Brown, 9.4. Wide receiver 58, Chase Claypool, 8.1. Wide receiver, Keenan Allen. Wide receiver 60, Keenan Allen, 7.5. Wide receiver 65, Terry McLaurin, 7. Wide receiver 69, Tyler Lockett, 6. Wide receiver 71, Russell Gage, 5.9. And wide receiver 85, Tyreek Hill, 3.9. Alrighty, Nick, who do you want to talk about?
I'm going to talk about everybody just broadly real quick. This is exactly why everybody says go take a running back early. Because when we talked about those running back studs, like throughout these weeks, there's always been 5, 6, 7 of those guys drafted in the top 15 up there. These wide receivers, you can list all of them and where they finished like the year or where they finished the regular season and where they are now. This is exactly why we say there's so much wide receiver depth. Just think about it this way. Nick talked about Jonathan Taylor being a bust at 10.8 points. DJ Moore is the wide receiver 46 with just 0.3 less points. That just shows you how deep the position is to begin with, one. And number two, the wide receiver position is always going to be inconsistent. It's always going to depend on game scripts. It's always going to depend on your quarterback's performance. A running back just comes down to how you perform, and it's so slim. Running back clearly needs to be drafted. I know I'm going on a rant for next year, but it just shows this is why you don't need to. Who was the top 10 receiver that we just talked about? T. Higgins drafted in the 5th or 6th round. Amon-Ra St. Brown, who went undrafted in most leagues. And we're talking about, 9 guys that were all drafted, or 8 of these guys were drafted probably prior to the 8th round. It's just going to happen in fantasy football. And you have Tyreek Hill, probably drafted number 1 or number 2 in most leagues, wide receiver 85 on the week.
Yeah, Tyreek Hill lost you guys matchups. I'm very lucky that I won by 0.02, but if you had Tyreek Hill this week and you counted on him for points, you probably lost your matchup, especially if you were versing Patrick Mahomes like I was. I was versing Mahomes, who was tossing TD passes left and right, just not to Tyreek Hill, so it didn't even offset. So, pitiful performance by Tyreek Hill. It's going to cause some people to not want to draft him next year. Tight ends, Mark Andrews is the tight end 1 again, 26.5 points. Dalton Schultz, tight end 2, 22.2. Tight end 4, Kyle Pitts, 16.2. Tight end 5, Zach Ertz, 13.4. Who's your tight end stud of the week?
Mine's Dalton Schultz. I know Nick's going to talk about it a little later. Dalton Schultz is matchup proof. I don't want to hear it. Dalton Schultz is finishing the season as a top 5 tight end when undrafted in most leagues. I know people are going to say Blake Jarwin was there. No, Blake Jarwin got hurt. And even before that, Dalton Schultz was clearly the tight end 1 on the team. He's averaging 12 fantasy points per game. He's been on a tremendous pace. Has been a red zone threat for the team. He's just been really good. He's been a really good tight end. Last 2 weeks, he's averaging 9 targets per game. Has 1 ball that you got targeted on that he didn't catch, and now he's going into Arizona, who's tough against the tight ends. Nick will talk about him later, and I'll probably argue with him later.
Oh yeah. So I forget which week Hopkins went out, but Zach Ertz last 3 weeks: 7 targets, 11 targets, 13 targets, 42 yards, 74 yards, 54 yards. Hasn't gotten the touchdowns, but Kyler Murray's leaning on him. I know Christian Kirk's had a pretty big week or 2 as well, but I think Ertz is going to be a guy that can be really reliable this week against the Cowboys. I think he's a guy you lock in, and I think he's a guy that can get you a touchdown and 50 yards. He could really help you win a fantasy championship this week. And the duds, Mike Gesicki, tight end 27, 5.2 points. Tight end 28, Dallas Goedert, 4.8. Tight end 30, George Kittle, 4.1. And tight end 35, Rob Gronkowski. Man, I want to take this with Kittle because Kittle almost lost me both of my matchups. I'm very lucky I had Deebo Samuel. I'm very lucky that I had Amari Cooper in another league. Like, I had some guys that did pull through, but Kittle, a guy I drafted in rounds 3 and 4, almost lost me 2 weeks or 2 leagues. Real disappointed in Kittle's performance, and he has a great match against Houston this week. He owes his owners a big one in the championship for almost costing them that semifinal.
Yeah, I kind of agree with you. I mean, Kittle's clearly the rough one. Gronk is a rough one. But mine's Dallas Goedert. People thought Dallas Goedert and Zach Ertz leaving meant that Goedert would clearly be, able to break into that top 5 tight end category for fantasy purposes. No, I'm sorry. Jalen Hurts is still a running quarterback. That team's a run-first team. As good as Dallas Goedert is and as much as I believe in him and his talent, the team's good. So they don't need to just rely on one player and say, go carry us. Jalen Hurts is mobile, does not throw checkdowns to tight ends. He looks for Goddard over the top, and if Goddard doesn't get open over the top, he doesn't get the ball. Devontae Smith is short. Miles Sanders is short. They like using Kenneth Gainwell in certain situations. Even some of those other receivers, they spread the ball. They don't really pick a favorite target like most teams do, and it's just a good football team. It's like the Colts, for example. Pittman was pretty solid all year. Jonathan Taylor was solid all year. and that's it. And a lot of people think they're going to upset two teams in a playoff matchup. So it's just a good football team. And unfortunately, this year, Goddard's just not going to be the piece that you thought he was.
Alrighty. We're now going on to lock or flop. One player from each position that we're going to lock, one player that we're going to flop for Week 17. Who's your quarterback lock for Week 17, Nick?
Mine's Trey Lance. I know it's going to be a debatable one, but going up against the Houston Texans, the Texans are not good against mobile quarterbacks. They're not good against regular quarterbacks. In the two games that Trey Lance started, he was averaging 17 points per game, which would have been good to be a top 10 at the bottom end of the top 10 quarterbacks this season. Trey Lance is good enough for a start this week against the Houston Texans, and the rookie very well could go deliver you a fantasy championship.
So for me, it's going to be Jalen Hurts. The last time that Jalen Hurts faced the football team, he had 29 fantasy points. He was a top 5 quarterback on the week. He's going to post those numbers again. The football team has given up the most fantasy points to quarterbacks, just gave up 31 to Dak. If you drafted Jalen Hurts in round like 10 or whatever round you drafted him, right now he's the quarterback 8 on the year. If you're in your championship, I know we're saying it a lot, but this is a guy that will win you your championship. He's going to give you 30 points. He's going to give you a great number. He's going to set you up really, really nice to win your championship. Who's your dud of the week, Nick?
Mine's Dak Prescott. Once again, I know I just did the same thing to Herbert earlier. Burrow. Burrow had a great game. Dak probably had the best half of football anybody's ever seen. 330 yards, 4 touchdowns with no problem. Absolutely slaughtered Washington. But let's not forget the 3 games prior where he hasn't cracked 12 points, has 1 touchdown in each of those games, hasn't cracked 240 passing yards. That's not good enough to be a start. And now he's going up against Arizona, whose defense is very, very good. Don't let that Lions game mislead you.
For me, it's going to be Justin Herbert, and you're still playing Justin Herbert. He's been the quarterback 2 on the year. You obviously still have to play him, but he's going up against the Denver defense. They've been a top 5 defense this year. They've been very, very good against quarterbacks. They've been a top 3 fantasy defense against quarterbacks. So not just a great NFL defense, but also a great fantasy defense. So I'm a little worried about Herbert. I'm worried he doesn't finish in the top 10 or maybe finishes at 10. I think he'll have a fine week. I know most leagues quarterbacks are scoring 25 plus. I think Herbert could get you like 18 or 20. Not going to lose you your matchup, but I don't think he's going to be the guy to decide your matchup from a winning standpoint. What about running backs, Nick? Who is your running back stud of the week?
Mine's Devin Singletary. They're going up against the Atlanta Falcons. The Falcons are horrendous against the running back position. On top of that, over the last 3 weeks after that loss to New England, the Bills really took a look in the mirror and said, we cannot be too Josh Allen reliant because it's just a detriment to the team. Not because Josh Allen isn't that good, but because you just can't solely rely on your quarterback to go carry you. So they finally decided to use Devin Singletary the right way. Over the last 3 weeks, he's averaging 17 points per game. That's good enough for a fantasy start. Hasn't had a game less than 14.9. About 15 points is his lowest from 3 weeks ago against Tampa. He's averaging close to 15 carries per game over that span. Has 2 touchdowns, has 4 catches on average in each of those games. He's just pretty much set up for a good game, and it's against a bad team. So it should be the Devin Singletary show out there.
For me, it's going to be Ronald Jones. I always play my running backs against those New York Jets. They've given up the most fantasy points to fantasy running backs. Ronald Jones had 16 fantasy points last week, 65 yards, and a touchdown. He also had 2 receptions on 3 targets. So I think Ronald Jones, if you picked him off your waiver wire 2 weeks ago, you need a running back to play in your flex spot or running back 2. Suit in Ronald Jones. He has a chance to get you 15, 20 fantasy points this week. Alrighty, Nick, who is your running back flop of the week?
Mine's Saquon Barkley. He's been a disaster. I'm sorry. He does not look good or nearly as good as football as he did in years past. I know pre-injury he had 2 really good games, but this year he has not cracked 65 rushing yards, and that's with him getting about 15 carries per game. He's had 2 really, really bad weeks that just happened. I know he's playing Chicago. I know it's favorable. I know he has some level of burst in him, but I have not seen it from him this year at all, even before the injury. So for me, not just this year, for years future, as long as Saquon Barkley is a New York Giant, you will not catch me drafting him. I don't care what his ADP is.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. He's my do not draft list for sure. Nick, plug your ears because I am flopping Michael Carter this week. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers have been very, very good against the running backs. They've surrendered the second least amount of fantasy points to running backs. The New York Jets are not a great football team. I can see the Bucs winning this game by like 14, 20 points. Therefore, I don't want to play Michael Carter this week. I would look to pivot if you have another option. Ronald Jones or somebody like, if you have to play him, I guess you have to play him, but I wouldn't even flex him this week. I would stay away from Michael Carter. What about receivers, Nick? Who is your wide receiver lock of the week?
I think I've said his name enough times, but I'm going to say it again because I've been on the train for too long not to keep hyping him up. It's Amon-Ra St. Brown. Over the last 4 weeks, this guy's been an absolute monster. He's averaging 11.5 targets per game, averaging a little over 9 catches per game, has 73 receiving yards as his minimum over that 4-week span, has 3 touchdowns in that time span, and this past week they handed him the ball twice. They want to use this guy as many ways as they can. Seattle's actually been pretty good in the secondary just because of how bad they've been against the run, but you're telling me Amon-Ra is the only legitimate target on the outside for them? Amon-Ra is clearly a must start this year, and he's a must target in every draft next year.
I wish I didn't speak about Jalen Waddle so much already because I do love Jalen Waddle, but he's facing the Tennessee Titans. Allow the 4th most fantasy points to wide receivers. They've been in the top 4 the whole season. Waddle's going to have a big day. Waddle's going to get you 15, 20 fantasy points. I talked about him before, so I'm not going to say much more, but Waddle's going to give you a fantasy championship. He's going to have a game like he did last year in that national championship for Alabama. He's going to have a big game this week. Alrighty, Nick, who's your wide receiver flop of the week?
Mine's Terry McLaurin. I hate to say it. I love the player.
I almost flopped him too. This is a good call.
I mean, he's going up against the number 2 team to the wide receiver position, and over the last 5 weeks, he's averaging 5 targets per game, averaging less than 3 catches per game, hasn't cracked 10 fantasy points in 5 weeks. It's a tough matchup. The quarterback situation there is horrendous. They are not going to be in the playoff picture come after this week. Terry McLaurin, I love you talent, but as long as you're there with this quarterback, it's not a startable situation for your fantasy championship.
For me, it's Russell Gage. Russell Gage is on a monster run for 3-4 weeks, and then he had a dud last week. He's going to have another dud this week, guys. The Russell Gage experiment is over. He's facing the Buffalo Bills that have surrendered the least amount of fantasy points to wide receivers. I don't want any part of Russell Gage. I don't really want any part of that Falcons offense this week against the Bills. I think the Bills are locked and loaded to get for a playoff run. I know Nick said he's against those Bills, but I think they're winning that division. I think the Bills are going to be a tough team to get out in the playoffs. I think they're going to hit their groove. So the Falcons are a good team to beat for that. Tight ends, Nick. Who's your, you know what? We're talking about the Bills, so I'm going to take this. I'm going to take Dawson Knox. Dawson Knox, I originally called him this year's, what did I call him? This year's Packers tight end from last year.
Robert Tonyan.
Because he's very touchdown dependent. I think that might be a little bit of an insult because Dawson Knox has been the tight end 6 on the year, basically been a top 5 tight end for most of the season. I know he got injured a couple of weeks ago. The Falcons have been bad against the tight ends for the entire season. They've been bad on defense the entire season. They're still riddled with COVID injuries on the wide receiver side for Buffalo. So Josh Allen will look to Dawson Knox in the end zone. I think he gets you a touchdown in like 50 yards this week. I think Dawson Knox helps you win your fantasy championship.
My tight end start of the week, it's Zach Ertz. I know Nick praised him a little bit earlier. Zach Ertz is going up against Dallas, very middle of the pack against the tight end position. And like you said, look at the target numbers since DeAndre Hopkins is gone. 7, 11, 13. That's really good numbers. The only tight end with more targets over that span is Mark Andrews. He's on a really good pace right now. He's averaging about 12 fantasy points per game over that 3-week stretch, and that's without finding the end zone. I think he can do it against Dallas. I'm not too worried about Kyler in this little short stunt without D-Hop. I think they'll be fine. I think they can move the ball without him.
I'm worried about Dalton Schultz. I know Nick says he's matchup proof. I know he's had a phenomenal season, been a top 10 tight end, but those Cardinals have been really, really tough against the tight ends. The Cardinals have surrendered the 4th least amount of fantasy points to tight ends. And Dalton Schultz isn't Travis Kelce. He's not George Kittle. He's not an elite tight end. I think he's a good tight end. I think he's in that second category, but he's not an elite one. So I see the Cardinals shutting him down this week, and I think he could post a dud for you if you start him in your fantasy championship.
Mine's Kyle Pitts. Kyle Pitts, over the last 3 weeks, has been really good, averaging 14 points per game but Buffalo is the number 3 team against the tight end position. It's going against Buffalo. He's used to that warm Atlanta and Florida weather from college. It's going up to get that cold tundra of Buffalo. Matt Ryan is not good in cold weather. This is really just a bad formula for him. It's a bad matchup.
Bad match for everybody in Atlanta right now.
He's on a historic pace for the tight end position. I think he's going to finish. I think he's on pace to have the most receiving yards for tight end. And another stat that I saw on online this past week was that Kyle Pitts has 0 touchdowns in the U.S. this year. He has 1 on the road up against the Jets, of course, in England. But when you have 0, he really has 1 touchdown on the season. 1 touchdown. Probably less workload in that cold weather with Matt Ryan against a tough team against the tight ends. It's exactly what you look for in benching a player that has been good all year.
It's actually amazing that he's the tight end 5 right now with only 1 touchdown. That's astonishing.
It's a real testament to why he should be drafted next year.
Yeah.
Like, it's a really good reason why he should.
Alrighty, we're going to take it to rapid fire. 2 guys from each game. We're going to tell you which one we'd rather start. We're going to stick it with the Bills and the Falcons. Devin Singletary versus Cordell Patterson.
I'm going Devin Singletary. I gave you the numbers earlier. Patterson coming off a bad game.
Yeah, I'm with you on that. Saquon Barkley or David Montgomery. Montgomery was huge last year for the fantasy playoffs. I think he's huge again in this championship. The Giants' defense is horrendous against the run.
I'm right there with you, taking Monty.
Tyreek Hill or T. Higgins or Jamar Chase. You could choose one.
I'm going to take T. Higgins over Tyreek Hill this week. I think he rides the hot hand. I think all 3 of these guys have good games, but I think T. Higgins gives you the big one.
I'm taking Tyreek Hill because I just can't see him putting up back-to-back duds. And if he does, people are going to seriously consider what round he goes into next year. A.J. Brown or Jalen Waddle?
I love Waddle this year, but A.J. Brown is clearly a monster on the outside. He's a different specimen on that team. The team just plays so much better with him out there. They go straight through A.J. Brown. I think there's still other weapons out in Miami, though they're not as good as Waddle. But A.J. Brown is clearly the only reliable weapon on that team right now.
I'm taking Waddle. I spoke about him enough. Hunter Renfrow or Michael Pittman?
I'm going to go with Renfrow. I think it's just pound the ball with Jonathan Taylor. I think Pittman is a good play. The Raiders have been pretty good against the wide receiver position anyway, but I think Renfrow is just the better start here.
I'm with you on that. Mac Jones or Trevor Lawrence? I'll play Mac. The Patriots defense is gonna really mess with Trevor. It's gonna be bad. I'm going with Mac.
It was a tough matchup to pick the 2 players to start. Why not go with the rookies? People will talk game strip with Trevor. Trevor's gonna go see some ghosts out there and go for some negative points.
Michael Carter or Ronald Jones? I mean, these are both in my lock flop. So,
I mean, that's clearly who you're taking. I want to disagree because I love Carter, but the matchup's there. I'm taking Rojo.
Terry McLaurin or Devontae Smith? I'm going to take Devontae Smith for the matchup.
Yep, same exact thing.
Marquise Brown or Odell Beckham Jr.?
OBJ is an absolute tank with Matthew Stafford. I'm going Odell.
Yeah, give me Odell. The Chargers defense or the Broncos defense? Give me the Chargers defense.
Give me the Broncos defense.
Oh, Herbert's just so tough, though. Herbert's such a good. He's such a good quarterback.
I know, but I just think I think that they just ground and pound the ball. Denver. I think Chargers walk away with the win, but I don't think they're going to force the turnovers that you think that they would.
Rex Burkhead or Elijah Mitchell?
I'm taking Mitchell. Don't give me that nonsense with Rex Burkhead.
I'm taking Mitchell as well. Tyler Lockett or Amon-Ra St. Brown?
I would take Amon-Ra over DK.
I'm taking Amon-Ra as well. The Seahawks are a dumpster fire. Okay. Zach Ertz or Dalton Schultz?
I'm starting both, but I'm going with Ertz.
I'm taking Ertz. DJ Moore or Alvin Kamara?
DJ Moore.
Kamara's just too talented. Sam Darnold starting at quarterback. The stack of Justin Jefferson, KJ Osborne, and Dalvin Cook, or the stack of Devontae Adams, Marquise Valdes-Scantling, or Aaron Jones? Give me the Vikings stack. The Vikings have been a very productive offense from a fantasy perspective and an NFL perspective. Give me that stack of those Vikings. I think all 3 of them can post 20-plus fantasy points.
I genuinely wouldn't be surprised if 100% of plays went to either Jefferson, Osborne, or Cook that game. So give me that combo.
Yeah. And on Monday Night Football, I think it's Monday Night Football, Nick Chubb and Najee Harris.
I love this question. I'm going Nick Chubb.
I'm going Nick Chubb as well. Najee Harris is going to lose you. If he hasn't already, he's going to lose you your fantasy championship. He's already, if you're in your fantasy championship with Najee Harris. Alrighty, that's our show this week. Thank you guys for listening. Hopefully you guys helped you out with your Week 17, your championship week decisions. If not, question graphic will be posted Saturday. You can drop your questions then. Live show on our YouTube, our Facebook, and our Twitter is Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. It's going to be a lot of fun. Maybe we'll bring in some guests. We'll see if we can. I'm throwing a wrench in there. We'll see what happens for our last live show of the year. It's going to be a lot of fun. Championships. Hopefully you guys win. Hopefully we win. 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. We're really excited for that one. Thank you guys for listening to this episode. Thank you for listening for this season, Nick. I'll let you say anything you want before we get out of here.
Thank you guys for all your support so far. We still got a lot more coming this offseason. I think we're going to do a season recap next week. And I know we got some other fun stuff in the works. So make sure you keep up to date on our social and make sure you keep checking out the podcast. It means a lot to all of us.
Thank you guys. We'll talk to you guys Sunday, 9:30 a.m. Eastern Time. Best of luck. Week 17 and in your championships.